that, delighted to, as everyone finishes enjoying their meals, kick off our keynote session. My partner in crime, I didn't realize you were standing right next to me already. Fantastic. So, big round of applause for John Opala. John is a wealth of almost just about 20 years of experience in information technology, specializing in IT management, IT infrastructure engineering, IT security management, and enterprise security architecture. He joins us today as the VP and Global CISO at Hanesbrands. And I'm going to hand it right over to him as he takes us through our keynote session for today, the changing dynamics of a CISO role in the age of AI. Very relevant. Take it away, John.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? Yes. I know I'm going to be competing with you on your lunchtime, but I'm asking you to give me some time so we can have a dialogue. As I go through my presentation, you're welcome to chime in, ask questions, interrupt me at any time. As he has said, I'm John Opala, and I'm glad to be back in the DC area. I used to work for McCormick as a Chief Information Security Officer, and I'm glad that two of my former colleagues are in here, Naeem Khan and Zora Ibrahimi. So I feel like a homecoming coming back to DC. I live in Charlotte now, so I lead security program for Hanesbrands. Hanes is a clothing and apparel company known for brands such as Champion, Bonds, Brass and Things, and the list goes on and on. What I'd like to address today is looking at cybersecurity leadership in the lens of the changes in the industry. And before I start this afternoon, how many CISOs do we have in the room? I feel your pain, friends. How many aspiring CISOs do we have in the room? Awesome, awesome. So I see myself as a cyber evangelist preparing, encouraging the future leaders in the cybersecurity space. The challenge we've had in the information security space has been that the amount of threats, attacks, the onslaught of data breaches has made the CISO role become slightly more painful than it needs to be. So as the industry changes, as trends changes, what do we need to do to ensure that the next generation of security leaders have the right arsenal within their toolkits to deliver value to the organizations? So the discussion today is predicated upon that. There's an opportunity for everyone to keep the bad guys out, irrespective of the challenges. Before I go to what some of those challenges are, so in the last 3 years, there's been a few precedents. So number one, we've had the legal case for the former Uber CISO. We've had the legal case for the current SolarWinds CISO. And then we had the SEC ruling from late last year that now requires a lot more spotlight in reporting of incidents, events, after you've determined materiality. And of course, our two good research organizations, Forrester and IDC, have chimed in that as we look at the changing trends of AI, artificial intelligence, looking at generative AI, machine learning, the bad guys are having a lot of capabilities at their fingertips that someone doesn't have to know coding. Like when we began working in the industry, you had to write your own scripts, your own technology to exploit an organization. Now you don't have to. You can just lie to an AI, generative AI, tell them I'm doing research, write me a code on how to exploit this XYZ. And depending on how you ask your question, you'll get enough information to target and exploit an environment. With all that power in the hands of the bad guys, I believe that the CISOs should not be scared because conversely, we have the same capabilities to prepare ourselves to be ready for the onslaught that the threat actors are coming with. Why do I think this is important and why should you care about this? Because if you look at the IDCs, they're saying that the investment in technologies geared to or pertinent to AI is exponentially increasing. which means you can't hide your head in the sand and simply ignore it. Whether you like it or not, your company is leveraging AI. Whether you never heard of it, somebody in HR is using ChatGPT to write resumes. Somebody in finance is using ChatGPT to summarize financials at the end of the month because it takes them too long, or using Microsoft Copilot to summarize that information. The question is the information they're inputting to those generative AI systems of value to you? If the bad guy had access to it, could it inadvertently expose your organization to cyber risk? And that's the reason why I think the role of a CISO has to somewhat change as we begin to plan the tech advancements, the tech challenge in the industry. How do we bravely address some of that to make sure that we deliver value in the organization? So, as we all know that the CISO role is very new in the corporate executive functions. It was until the 90s that the term CISO was coined. Information security leaders, we had ISGs, and then we had the first CISO, I think in 1994, hired by the Citicorp, primarily to establish a functional group that could look at risks with the lens of cybersecurity. And Steve became the first CISO, and he built a legacy, had much of what we are doing today. Almost we give credits to him because he was the first person to trailblaze the role of a CISO. So as the CISO role is still very mature, and depending on what organization you are in, some CISOs are not corporate executives, which means they're not covered under directors and officers insurance. They may not have the authority to make decisions on behalf of the company, the CFO or the chief legal counsel, maybe the people making or signing off on your 10K, 8K reporting. But that paradigm shift is coming now, with the SEC now requiring a lot more reporting and a lot more information. The legal counsels, your CFO and your CIO, are now beginning to turn to the CISOs as leaders and authority in the space to make sure we're not giving false information, because now there's a catch. You just can't go make up stuff and say, yeah, all our data is great, we are secure. How do we know that? Because SolarWinds is struggling through that now. How do we know that? Because the former Uber CISO may have misrepresented things, we don't know, but based on the information, that's changed and has put a spotlight on our role. So if you look at Steve established a foundational basis on what a CISO role is. However, over time, the role is now changing from tactical, from being your technologies, from being the person who can configure all the ransomware dispelling things, the person who can talk all the geek stuff that nobody knows about, to a business leader. And I think that's the changing dynamics in the role, that we're now business risk management leaders, as opposed to technologies that can walk into a room and wow everyone with our technical expert knowledge. Don't get me wrong, those skill sets are still very relevant. You need to know what your team are doing. You need to know what your team are responsible for, and you need to know how to help your team function efficiently and effectively. But for a CISO to add value to the organization, he or she needs to be able to sit at the executive table. At the executive table, they care less about the mumbo jumbo of our technologies, right? They want to know, I make 50 widgets a week in this plant, gives me $1 billion a year. I want to make sure that operation runs uninterrupted. It is our role to take a look at that business requirement and say, for us to keep this business running for this segment of the organization, I need these technologies, I need these people, I need these skill sets, I need these processes. Looking at people, process, technology to enable that. And when we shift the dialogue from being tech-driven to business risk-driven, it's very easier for us to get the budget, to unlock the funding and get the support at the C-suite level that we badly need to execute on our function as CISOs. So I've kind of plotted what many of us know, and I want to read it for you, what the traditional role of a CISO is: tech, some compliance oversight, incident response, awareness training, and secure technology. But I think that as AI is disrupting many industries, as other technologies are disrupting many industries, and by comparison, most of the technologies that we've heard of takes 5, 10, 20 years to be fully adopted. It took cloud forever to be fully adopted. The first time I published my first article on cloud computing was way, way back when. No one's talking about it. And now, even today, very few companies have moved everything into the cloud. Conversely, AI comes out, and all of a sudden, it is the thing. Everybody is using AI. It is the language in every place you go into AI. So the rapid adoption of AI seems to be exceeding everything in technology space that we've seen in the past, which means as the organizations jump onto it, and I think by comparison, things like cloud computing required architecture, engineering, and planning, all that. Generative AI doesn't require any of that. You just need to know, type in your keywords, and user adoption is there. So I think the risk also increases exponentially as the new technologies, new standards arise, and we have to be able to rise to the occasion. So the role of a CISO, I think I've described that: simply managing risk, making sure that our technologies are in place, right processes are in place, and delivering value. What I want to share for those who are aspiring to be CISOs, so the numbers here are not my numbers. These are from Robert Half Technologies and Manpower United. They do a salary analysis in comparing what an average CISO costs. This is based out of the Charlotte market of North Carolina. The rates in DC when I worked up here was slightly more different. The numbers may not be 100% accurate because they're looking at a summary on average of the 1,000 people they interviewed. That's what they came up as an average. Your actual salary could be lower, could be higher, and this for Fortune 500 companies. If you're working for a more bigger company, maybe your actual comp may be different. But by and large, the numbers from Robert Half and Manpower United seem to be very accurate, that the function of a CISO, if you look at compensation and look at the work we are doing, I think we are still very grossly underpaid compared to a CFO or somebody else like that. So if you're aspiring to a CISO, you may not necessarily making $1 million day one, but there's a lot of good opportunities, things you do to help improve the organization. So let me stop there for a second. There's any question. I see people looking at that like, those numbers are wrong, John. I'm not making that much money. Where do you get those from? They are averages of averages, right? Is any of this seeming familiar to you? So contrasting a CIO and a CISO. So mostly CISOs, we are charged with the business risk management. A CIO generally is responsible for tech transformation. And for the largest time, CIOs were valued as corporate executives, while CISOs were not. Because by and large, CISOs, some still report to the CIO, some report to legal, some report to the CEO, and depending on how your organization is structured, a CISO role could be a corporate executive or may not. In some organizations, a CISO is still a director level role, depending how big or small it is. So CISOs could be in different facets. You could be the senior director of your organization, but you own the responsibility for cyber risk end to end. By extension, whether you have the title or not, you are really a CISO. And that's kind of the most strange thing in the industry, that not all CISOs are created equal. But I think the function and the responsibility remains the same. Whether you're a CISO, a 2-people company, or a 60,000 people company like where I'm working, or a 100,000 company, people company, the role still is the same. The magnitude of your problems differs depending on the size, the market, the industry, and where you do business in, but the risk never changes. So what can we do as CISOs to make sure that even as we grapple with all these changes, all these challenges, that we are still, number one, current, number two, relevant, and number three, we are doing ethically what's expected of us. So that's the biggest challenge. As a CISO, there are opportunities to cut corners, there are opportunities to make decisions on behalf of the organizations, and honestly, sometimes we are armstrong. As a CISO, you may not have the budget you need. Many of you, I think, have a lot of money. You go to your office, you ask your boss for $1 million, they just write you a check, right? So I work in manufacturing. Getting money is like getting blood out of a stone. You have to plan, you got to ideally present the risk in business terms, and plot against everything else you purchased. In the last few years, what can I replace? What can I optimize? Do I need to cut headcount? Do I need to do X, Y, Z? Because budget doesn't always come easily. So I think being relevant, being current, and ensuring that you're still doing your job effectively is the biggest challenge that every CISO faces. So, why am I saying that? Because there is a transition from the role of being a technologist. We've always been seen as an information security manager. I'm responsible for all this list of things. I talk at the technology level. Maybe I've got my own steering committee that listens to me once in a while. Maybe I'm invited to the audit committee for 15 minutes, for 15 minutes to go talk, I think, what I do. But when I walk away, nothing really takes effect. And I've been there where you know that I'm going to be making this is my pitch. We have this OT or manufacturing problem. We have this challenge. I think right now, I'm going to leverage my partners, EY, Ernst & Young, Enzo, whoever your partners are, to come do an assessment for me. Give me something that I can rely on to go unlock the budgets for me to move the business forward. And you do all that great stuff. You present the audit committee, the budget committee, and everybody says, yeah, we agree with you, John. This is the right thing to do for business. And you walk away, and they turn around to the CFO and the CIO. What can we cut to enable John, right? And the CIO has got an obligation to transform the business. So he's not cutting anything because he wants the shiny new things. The things the CIO does are the shiny new things. The new SAP, the new Microsoft Dynamics, the new everything else. And all of a sudden, all that money that was being released, after you spread it like peanut butter, you come at the bottom and, oh, John, we are sorry. We can only get you vulnerability scanner this year. Next year, we'll see if we can get you the next thing. So how do we compete for funding? Because it's not just enough to scare the daylights out of people, right? I mean, we did that before. When I first got the industry, in my career span Africa, Europe, and now the US, we would scare the heck out of people. I mean, ransomware is coming, here's the money, right? Now there's a lot of it in the news. And as one of the presenters I said earlier, we've also paid for cyber insurance. So the organization's like, yeah, maybe if we were impacted, that's why we are paying $4 million a year for cyber insurance. So maybe that's also helped perpetuate businesses' resistance to overinvest in security unless you work for a highly regulated organization like a healthcare, DoD, or government. So we have to kind of rethink how do we shift our discussions to more strategic discussions. How do we shift our presentations from simply being, this is the risk we care about, this is going to hit you hard, do this, to shifting, looking at the risks, look at the compliance requirements, looking at the technology challenges, and making a business case. Making a business case. So you can talk at the same level as the VP of product development is doing. Because the VP of your product development would say, I want you to open a new plant. It's going to cost you $10 million, but I'm going to increase our productivity by X. Revenue, total revenue is going to increase by Y. Our net profit is going to be A. And when you look at those numbers, they are measurable, they are attainable, and it's very easy for the leadership to unlock the funding. When we present our numbers, usually they are cost avoidance, they are risk avoidance, and it doesn't matter what model you use. Fair Institute, NIST risk, the numbers are fuzzy. You cannot really correlate it to how the person presenting on a business development will present theirs. So we have to figure out how do we, as a cyber leadership teams, begin to think strategically how to present business risk in relation to cyber to enable us to allow those that have the wallets to release the funding so we can be protected. Is any of that making sense? So generally, what do we do in the CISO role? So, you're wondering why is he repeating this multiple times? There's a reason to the madness, right? So, so if you're looking at traditional CISO role, you got your governance, risk, and compliance, you got your identity access management, you got your sub-engineering and architecture function, you've got your maybe privacy dotted line to you, or maybe responsible for it, identity access management, and then at the end of the day, that's it. But I'm thinking that as the industry changes, as AI technology changes, we need to think about governance end to end, not just the compliance function of it. How can governance help elevate the discussions? When you meet the steering committees, even now NIST CSF 2.0, governance has become a very big important of that framework because it can help you elevate the discussions. So you're not just going to be talking about, oh, I think that I'm having 10,000 devices, haven't been patched in a month, and we are running a race for doing that, which is very good. It's a very acknowledgeable. But to a CFO, to a CEO, they don't understand what's the correlation between those unpatched things and the risk may be exposed to. So being able to kind of tie the dotted lines of some of these things, which in terms of technology are very meaningful to us, so that the other organizations can understand that. And also looking at the teams you have. Do we need to upskill our teams? Because there's a scarcity of cyber resources globally. It doesn't matter where you are. I mean, you can say, I'm going to be offshoring to India. The market is maxed out. I'm going to be offshoring to East European, maxed out. Depending, it doesn't matter where you are. I've hired in India, I've hired in Ukraine, I've hired in Poland, I've hired in everywhere. And all those markets that in the past you could get very affordable resources, you can no longer get that. The ongoing rates are almost comparable to the US market. So what do we need to do? Maybe build a technology development program or a cyber development program working with your HR organization to have a pipeline for people that you can train as they grow up over a year, 2 years, they become your next sets of leaders. Instead of relying on primarily going out and hiring, tomorrow they're gone, hiring, tomorrow they're gone, hiring, tomorrow they're gone. So we have to kind of think, how do I make my team become more relevant? How do I optimize security operations? There are things that should never be in-house, tier 1, tier 2 SOC. Somebody can do it cheaper for you. So if you're going to be managing your own security operations, look at cost-benefits analysis. What are some things that somebody else can do much more faster, cheaper, and easier for you? And what are the things that you can really strategize on? The real value add, the threat hunting, things that maybe a partner cannot do because they don't understand your business, they don't understand your architecture, and the geographical locations and all that good stuff. And I think finally is embracing vulnerability management. It's kind of the biggest issue for an organization. Automation of instant response. I think the biggest thing AI is going to do for us, we are piloting, leveraging AI to do most of the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 work. So I can use my outsourced resources to do more targeted threat hunting, blue team, red teaming, as opposed to simply having 40 people waiting for something to go blimp so they can go respond to it. Because you can have an AI automate most of that. You're having an attack coming to you, spam of hundreds of emails. You can execute that, identify that using AI, rip those mails from the mailboxes. You don't need anyone to see that. You think that an endpoint is going to be impacted, isolate the box. You can do that automatically. There are things that we no longer need people on a keyboard to go do. And some of the advantages I believe AI and machine learning will bring to play for a CISO as CISO's roles change. And I'm thinking as we do that, we will also be empowering our teams to do things that currently they haven't done. So instead of losing someone to another company, maybe it's done SOC 1 for 2 years for you, by automating, leveraging AI to do some of this, and these bots that we are talking about, you can now have this person leading your blue team work or doing something else, maybe moving to a different team, and therefore you still have continuity instead of losing the resources. So why is the role important? People ask me that. There's a feeling of self-importance, self-worth that every CISO carries along with them. People ask me, what do you do? I say, I'm a great pretender. I pretend to know a lot of things, but I'm a master of none, right? And we all have to do that. I mean, if I'm meeting the IAM team, I'm talking identity access management. If I'm meeting with the GRC team, I'm the awareness training expert, right? I'm the policy expert. I'm the standards expert. So we pretend to know a lot of things. But when we step back at the back of it, what is it that we are really responsible? So I think as a CISO, you got to understand what is it that you're bringing to the table, to your organization, and how can you elevate those discussions. And I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but how can we elevate those discussions to ensure that we manage business risks? Not technology risks, because sometimes we confuse the two. We are not simply saying this IT thing. We are managing business risk. I see cybersecurity as a business risk management process that we rely on cyber technologies to remediate. So if you can see yourself as a business risk leader, the discussion changes. When you meet with the CFOs, it's not about the widgets and its patching. It's not the servers that are end of life, end of support. Is we having a business operations that cannot run because the technology we are using has passed their last day of support. Microsoft has told me we can't get this unless we pay them $6 million, so can they extend support and write out new small patches, but we can't guarantee availability, right? So you're saying instead of spending $6 million for this that we don't know, how about I just upgrade all this to the cloud? And therefore, you can say, I'm going to be spending $6 million or spend $12 million. But the value I get is X. So you've changed the discussion. It's not so much, I've got servers, end of life, end of support, firewalls, end of life, end of support. And because as a manufacturing, that's good news for us. They want to sweat that machine. They want to sweat all that hardware because for them, the more they can get out of it, the better off they are. So I think thinking how do we elevate the discussion in a CISO is at the core of the significance of a CISO function. It's not the technologies we are delivering, it's how we as a CISO organization or as information security professionals, we elevate the discussion of risk in terms of business and look at how do we enable businesses to see our function as just as important as the product development team, as the manufacturing team, and not just the IT people that can be let go anytime because if we don't have money, we cut down IT. And every one of us will tell you that if there's no budget, the first group are being cut at the cost centers, right? And IT is always considered a cost center, which, without saying it arrogantly, we don't add value. That's how the business sees us. So how do we kind of flip the paradigm and see the value we add to the organization in cybersecurity? So there are a few things that have changed from the past. From the time Steve was the first CISO to now, he dealt with technologies, he worked with a lot of things, set the precedent where many of us have followed. But over time, there's a paradigm shift. There's a changing where there are things now imposed upon us that require for us much more diligent, much more vigilant. And some of those, as I said previously, the SEC ruling, some are compliance requirements. I think the pandemic helped change how we do some of the work. I remember many of us worked for companies that were primarily meet face-to-face in office. By the advent of the pandemic, we had to architect remote access almost immediately. I think we did our remote access within 48 hours. As Italy was going down, I'm told on Monday, from Thursday, Italy is down. We're going to have remote access. I called Cisco. Oh, yeah, the hardware can't support that. You don't have the hardware for this. I called Verizon, MPLA circuit. It's going to take months. Then you got to figure out how do I enable that. And that's when we switched to Secure Services Edge. So I could have anyone connecting through tools like Zscaler from anywhere, from any device. So I wasn't constrained by having a big MPLS circuit. I wasn't constrained by the hardware capacity for my routers and firewalls. So as things force us to make sometimes quick decisions, we have to kind of think, how do we enable and sustain this going forward? So is the role of a CISO important? I leave it up to you. I think it is, but all CISOs feel a sense of self-worth that may not be warranted. That could just be me. You guys are very polite, so. So I was speaking at the GSEC conference in Dubai. I had about maybe 5,000 CISOs in the room. And when I said that, everybody just lifted up their hands. I said, well, I'm not the only one with the big head, so I'm in good company. But with the amount of pain that we go through, so CISO is a very thankless job, right? When things are going good, you're the hero. When things break, everybody begins with security. Something just fails. Email didn't come through. Security blocked it, right? As Microsoft failed to do something on their own that impacted us because of now we're all SaaS, right? Security. So there's a lot of undue pain that CISOs or anyone working in security goes through that sometimes makes the role more challenging. But I think in a nutshell, a CISO role is more of a risk management role. So if we elevate the discussion to business risks, I think we will change the trajectory of the function of cybersecurity. So we're not just your AV guys, your firewall guys. We're not just your identity access management guys. We're the people that are enabling business to make that next $1 billion, enabling business to make that next $100 million, whatever your business strategy is. I think that's where the role is shifting to. And there are things that kind of help guide us through some of those. Compliance is a big deal. If you're in a heavily regulated industry, you got to be compliant. There's no question about that. If you are in a non-heavily regulated industry, then you got to rely on your selling skills. So no one ever told you that a CISO role is a sales job. But you have to sell your ideas. I used to work for Cisco Systems. There were many opportunities, but we just couldn't go be given a project. You had to be the right person for that. So we had to propose ideas within our own teams, go market them before our leadership, and the best ideas always win. The same thing is very applicable in a CISO function role, or a cybersecurity leader, a security technician, a security engineer. You may want to bring the next best tool, and turns out not the next best tool. How many of you had CrowdStrike? Can we go there? Maybe not, right? I mean, CrowdStrike is the best tool I think out there. It's an EDR. And everybody went to it, including myself, until CrowdStrike wasn't. So I think as you look at some of the decisions we make decisions based on the information we have at the time. And sometimes those information, your bet can be great, and nothing happens, or somebody at CrowdStrike makes a mistake, sends up content update to all their customers at once without testing it amongst themselves first, and crashing the global network. That's a CISO. It wasn't a breach, but your tool caused the outage. There was materiality. There's an impact on the function itself, right? So I think the decisions we make, whether for compliance, availability, risk remediations, risk avoidance, the decisions you make, you still own them. And you're still held accountable, whether you caused it or not. This one was self-inflicted. There was no reason this should have happened, but all CISOs who went through it had to go back and answer to your board of directors and explain, especially when they begin to ask you, why don't you have 6 AVs? Why couldn't you go have one for redundancy? Get one for Asia, get one for Australia, and get one for Americas. So if the Australian goes down, the rest are still working. Then you got to step back and just say, let me make sure I understand what you're asking me. You want me to invest 3 times the cost that I'm paying now for 3 disparate systems in 3 geographical locations, train new skill sets for the 3 things to support 3 things, maybe double my support team with that, and then put some numbers along that. And all of a sudden, you're not just a technology guy, you're a business guy, right? Because you're saving the company money. So as we go through some of these challenges, as I keep saying, it's all about the business. It's all about business risk. So if you forget anything I say today, cybersecurity function is a business risk function. And we need to begin to think as the business would think for us to be relevant and for us to be effective in our functions at whatever capacity you are in. Whether you are the top of the food chain as a CISO, you're an aspiring CISO, you're a technician, you're an engineer, you're an audit, you're in governance, you're in awareness training, it doesn't really matter. Our function is business risk. And how do we enable some of that? And there are a few technologies that I think, as I mentioned originally, are going to influence how we make decisions going forward. Without saying AI is at the forefront of that. Generative AI, I think, is going to disrupt our industry very drastically. Anyone is now a hacker, and anyone can now send you a resume that if you look at, you want to hire them yesterday. I have interviewed people in the last 1 month who are really having AI answer all the questions for them. When we went through the entire process, they're on video, and we could tell that they would turn around a little bit more on the left, a little more on the left, a little more on the left, but they were great. So I hired the guy. Day 1, he could not log into a firewall. And you're saying, John, you're a terrible interviewer. Ask anyone who's worked for me. I'm very technical, very, very technical. But this guy fooled all of us. I mean, AI answered all the questions for him. So after he joined, so his immediate director calls me and says, John, we've got a problem. Our senior engineer is not really a senior engineer. So I said, let's give him a lab. Let's give him a lab test. And that's how we found out he could not. And he first up, he used AI to answer all the questions. So we're not just dealing with AI being used to exploit, send emails, business email compromise. You're using with AI, people lying on their resumes on interview, and now potentially AI being used to replace us, right? So I think as we make decisions, AI disruptively is going to change the industry, whether we like it or not. Because you're saying, oh, John, that won't happen to me. I'll make sure they're standing right in front of me. Yes. If you work in a small location, if you got 60,000 employees, over 50 countries, there is no way you're going to interview everybody face-to-face every time, unless you clone yourself. So there are challenges, real challenges. The question now is, now that I've learned from that, how do I prepare for the next interview? Lab first for technical roles. Yeah, so if AI can type for them, then I'm screwed. So as we grapple with changes, we have to change also with the times and figure out how do we make this work for all of us. Regulatory compliance, I've mentioned that, so I won't go deep into that. So challenges faced by CISOs in compliance. I think many of us complain about compliance. If you work through the audit, which I do, they could be your best friends or your worst enemies, right? But the one thing I've learned, audit enables you to restate things sometimes that are difficult to say. I can't just go and say, I need $10,000 to go buy this widget. But if I said my internal audit and external audit, because of this regulatory compliance, wants us to do this, the discussion changes. Because at the end of the day, the CFO has to sign off that the data they're providing on their incomes report is accurate. If EY would say we don't trust the data because there's a significant deficiency or a material weakness, it changes the game for you. So you can leverage compliance where necessary to help justify your cause. There's nothing wrong with that. So work with your audit, make them become your friends, don't let them become your enemies. Because many times when you look at the deficiency list of 50 things, all of us want to fight back, right? Because, I think that's wrong, maybe that's not right. My recommendation is work with your audit team, identify what's important, what could expose you to the biggest risk, and let those guide some of the discussions to unlock opportunities for you in an investment. Governance is a big deal. NIST decided to give it their own functional area now. So think about how you strategically align governance to your cyber steering committee, to your risk committee, enterprise risk management, and what you need to bubble up through that. Because governance is not just about policies and standards and all that. It goes beyond that. How do we ensure that the board of directors understand the risk that cyber may be imposing on the organization? Are they aware? Have they accepted it? What are your risk treatment criteria? It's a big game, not just, I got policies, I got standards, let's now go home. We can do awareness training, leverage the opportunity for governance, and build a much more stronger support structure through that. In my organization, what we've done for the steering committee, we got the CEO's direct reports as part of the steering core. Then I have below that a cyber risk committee that involves some of the VPs and SVPs, and we have regular meetings. My director of governance, risk and compliance meets with at the lower level. We bubble lagging and leading key indicators of risk to the leadership. So by the time we go to the board, we are all aligned on what these risks are. So there are no surprises. Why am I doing that? Because you have a precedent of the former Uber CISO being sued and accused of misrepresenting or misreporting what the risks were. As a result, the organization absolves themselves from risk and say, well, he never told us. So therefore, we need to know about it. So we have, as a leader in your organization, you want to make sure you're not misrepresenting information. Because if you are the one misrepresenting information, then you're absolving the organization from their responsibility to provide other funding, resourcing, and support for risk remediation. So it's very important that as you work through your governance, you build a coherent governance structure with the measurable and attainable goals and objectives. Not just walk in, all is great, we're all happy, we're doing great. If something goes bad, take advantage of it. Never let any crisis go unused. That's my philosophy. Never let any crisis go unused. If something breaks up on a site and availability was lost for a week without being a cyber, say, hey guys, I told you, we can help, This is how cyber plays a role. I'm kind of adding more to it, but you can take advantage of any crisis. The SEC made that very evident, as I've alluded to. The main keys from this slide is the reporting requirements. And I'm going to go to that on my final slide as we look at some of the things we learned from the former Uber CISO. I think when you look at reporting, do not under or devalue the risks you've identified. Many times we get kind of pushed down before, if you present to the board, how many people present to the board here? Yeah. So you first create your first agenda, right? The list of things you want to talk about. And it goes through your other steering call. They look at it. They come back, they say, tweak it a little bit, sugarcoat it more. He goes to the CFO. The CFO says, oh, no, we can't say that. Let's go tweak it more. He goes to the CEO for the final review. By the time you go before the board, what you wrote is diametrically opposed to what is being presented. And you are thinking like, did I really say that? Is that really what I meant? So sometimes you got to find a way to stand your ground where the essence of the message is not lost. Because everyone, including the CEO, is afraid to go before the board and present bad news. Because when you go before the board, it's like a firing squad. The questions back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then they turn to the CEO, what are you going to do about it? But if you align before that and you say, hey, Mr. CEO, Mr. CFO, I understand where you're coming from, but this is big enough that we should not misrepresent it. Let's find a better way to message this. This is the gaps, these are the risks, but this is what we are doing or planning to do. So as you go before the board, you got the problems, but the actions, corresponding actions are also highlighted, makes a big difference. In my experience in presenting to boards is that you just don't go present the problem. You highlight what the challenges are, but also reference to what you're planning to do about it or how you're going to remediate that. So evolving the role of a CISO, I've kind of touched some of this as I went along through it, so I will not dig deep into the slide. The key is looking at yourself as a business strategy. So look at what's the organization trying to do. Most companies are what we want to double revenue in 10 years or 5 years or grow the footprint in X, Y, Z. Step back from the cyber side. That lofty goal that your company is having, what are some of the risks that the organization could be exposed to? If you're going to be growing the company, double the size in 5 years in revenue, it will mean you'll either be acquiring somebody or expanding geographic locations, adding more offices, building more plants, hiring more people. What are some of those risks? And begin to say, if we are doing X, we need to also preemptively be planning to do these things to curtail the impact of risk when that growth is achieved. And therefore, begin to have a line item in the budget. For this big growth we are planning, what's the cyber budget to help align with this goal and objective? Because if you don't have that, that's how we run out of money. And therefore, you've got no budget available to you because everything else was planned except for cyber risk. And you're always trying to play catch-up, going back, asking for more money, being challenged, being forced to kind of restate, confirm, revalidate yourself. So my encouragement to all of us is as the company plans to grow or whatever the thing is, as a business risk leader or manager, begin to think, how do I align with this? Make friendship with the product development teams, with your CFO. Make sure you are a seat with the CEO. If you're a CISO, there should be a skip level. At least you have a one-to-one face with the CEO without having the CFO and his bodyguards there and the rest of them who are managing the money, right? So having that skip level opportunity allows you to be very transparent and say, this is kind of what we are working on. We think these are the challenges. This is where we're doing great on, but this is what we need to, this is what we are striving towards. As a business leader, not our technologies, a business risk manager, we have the power to influence the trajectory of the business and make sure the risk is accounted for as the company grows and matures and achieves their objectives. And with that, I think I'm coming to my two last slides. So some of the emerging trends, very much aware, threats are increasing. AI has made everybody a hacker. Anybody can breach your organizations. There's deep fakes and all kinds of things that are happening. Conversely, there are capabilities we can leverage. We think as organizations are moving to cloud security more because of secure services edge architectures, zero trust, SD-WAN, whatever you want to call it, the risk will continue to grow exponentially as companies shut their data centers and move to the cloud. I also think that software supply chain is going to continue to be a bigger issue that we have to think and grapple with. Just like the CrowdStrike event, there are many events similar to that, that may happen as we consolidate on many platforms and go into the cloud. And you say, John, we are not. Well, if you're on SAP Rise, you're on SAP's cloud, right? If you are using Microsoft Dynamics, you're on Microsoft's cloud. Whatever, if you're on Oracle, all the big ERM technologies that we rely on to run business, by and large, are no longer on premise. The days of IBM S400 seem to be going away past us, right? And that brings new challenges. Just because they own the infrastructure doesn't absolve you of your responsibility for data protection. So even as we move to the cloud, the risk still increases. And I think finally there's talent shortage. I think cybersecurity is the greatest area of challenge of finding talent. I had 6 roles posted. It has taken us about a month and a half to get good resumes for some of those. And the people we are getting are asking 3 times for what HR thinks the role should pay. So I'm having a cloud architect role. The guy tells me he wants to make $350,000. So I'm like, okay, guy, you must be really good. So let's take a look at what you have. 2 years experience. I'm like, I should stop what I'm doing, become a cloud architect, right? So because of the disparity on talent, the people also begin to ask strangely very obscene numbers. I'm not saying that they're not justified. What I'm saying, the market has shifted on us. And HR hasn't come along. Because if you work for a manufacturing organization, most of our HR are used to hiring hourly employees, $10, $12 an hour. So anytime they look at that, say, wait a minute, why would I be paying somebody that much money to be in IT? And therefore, you have to go back and say, it's the industry, it's the market. You go to Robert Half, you go to whatever tool you use, and HR's purpose is to save money. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if they are planning to pay $12 for cyber resource, you will not be finding any anytime soon. So how do we also bring HR along with us? Or do we consider using a 40-60 rule or a 60-40 rule? I get 40% in-house, 60% work with partners to deliver for me. Or I keep 60%, whatever number works for you. So we have to kind of rethink, because the talent shortage is going to continue. You're saying, but John, all the universities are training them up with the technologies from 3 years ago. So I teach as an adjunct professor, and I will tell you that the problem with the higher education in America is that what we are teaching today is not usable today. The curriculum for today is what was 3 years ago, right? So because of that, even though colleges are bringing people out, they are not ready for work day one. So, and that's the disparity. And no one is figuring out how do we bridge that gap. So talent shortage is still going to be there. How do we plan for it? You got to see what works for you. No one size fits all. But you can work with your partners, or you can have a mechanism of 40 in, 60 out, whatever works for you, and begin to plan a pipeline for resourcing. AI, I began by saying the changing role of a CISO in the age of AI. So I said all that to come and conclude with this. So everything that I said was geared towards this. As we begin to see AI adoption overpassing everything, I think it's incumbent upon us to build some kind of AI governance within the organization. I began by saying we cannot assume that your organization does use AI. People tell me all the time, we blocked everything. I say, really? You blocked everything? And then how about the app on the mobile device? Oh, maybe we didn't block that. So people will find a way to use the technology. Simply saying no is not good enough. If you say unblock everything, they'll copy that information to their personal device and go paste it in ChatGPT. How do I know? Ask Elon Musk. A while back, his team kind of exposed PCI significant information on ChatGPT because they were restricted from doing that. This person uploaded the file into ChatGPT with customer information, PII, and credit card information all through. They came back and they said, well, there were masks, there were all this or the other one. But anyone who's been in the industry for a minute will tell you simply masking the numbers, that's what means they're not reversible, right? So anyone grabs that, you slap it, some of the newer technologies, in 5 minutes, you got all critical information. So how do we plan around that? Build some governance, have a mindset that's more inquisitive, not just saying no, figure out how do we enable ourselves, and have some kind of data-driven decision-making. And finally, AI governance. I think I'm having 3 minutes to go. I see my first 2 minutes of warning, I think. Let me kind of stop there and see if there's any questions for me. If there's none, I want to thank you all with this last slide. My challenge to you is I think there's an opportunity for every one of us to change our function in a CISO space. If you're an aspiring CISO, there's room for you. We think the market is ripe. Many of us won't do this forever. A few years we'll look to retire, and we hope that there are some knowledgeable, business-savvy people who can help with the changing dynamics in the cyberspace. So, it's a question? Yes.
I was just wondering how you've been able to deal with any of the OT tech debt challenges around OT security in your space.
So you are talking my language. In the last 3 companies I worked for, I architected OT risk remediation. I think number 1 is look at asset visibility. And there are tools like Armis, Clarity, and the rest of them that can give you that, or Forescout, iInspect. Then from there, look, after you identify the assets that you have, take a look at what do I need to do to remediate that. Do I need to logically segment them? Or do I need to do physical air gapping, et cetera, and then how do I get that insight into SOC? What I've done is kind of train the SOC team to be able to handle OT and IT data. As many of you know that OT and IT is like speaking Swahili and English, right? They are 2 different languages, different protocols, but number 1 is in manufacturing, there's always going to be a discrepancy between OT and IT. 1 line costs $10 million to build. The computers running it cost $5,000, $10,000. There is no way the business is going to replace a $10 million machine line because of a 10,000 perceived risk. So we have to figure out how do we isolate, insulate those risks so the blast radius is limited in the event that we're exploited.
We have time for one more question. This one's from the online platform. John, great presentation. This is from Kunli Fasalojo again. John, what is perception with Europe's leadership in AI compliance compared to the U.S.'s ongoing efforts? Should the CISO handle AI compliance, or is there a need for an AI chief strategy officer considering global differences?
So that's a great question. I think it depends on the size of the organization. Just we got data scientists and data leaders. It may depend on how big your organization is. I think on the 27th of July, NIST published a new article on AI framework that may be worth taking a look at, and how NIST is looking at managing risk to AI. In terms of who should own that, from cyber risk, the CISO owns risk end to end. So whether this falls within a functional data group, the CISO still will be responsible for ensuring that cyber risk induced by AI are mitigated or remediated. And with that, thank you very much. Have a great day.